Ladies and gentlemen, welcome you all to the concluding session of 5th International Conference on Next Generation Genomics and Integrated Breeding for Crop Improvement. It is great privilege for me to invite and introduce the living legend, Professor M.S. Swaminathan, to here. He is popularly known as Indian Father of Green Revolution. He is founder and chairman of the M.S. Swaminathan Research Foundation. He is the first World Food Prize laureate. He has numerous awards and honors to his credit, such as Fellow of almost all Science and Agriculture Academies, including U.S. National Science Academy, Royal Society. He has been awarded of Padma Vibhushan, Padma Bhushan and Padma Shri, highest civilian awards from Government of India. Once again, I would like to say that we are very excited to have him in this conference. We are very honored to have you, sir. Thank you. And now I would like to invite Dr. David Bergvinson, is the Director General of ICRISAT. Since he joined in ICRISAT January 2015, he has been engaged to take ICRISAT to the new heights. Prior to his current appointment, Dr. Bergvinson served Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as Deputy Director within the Agriculture Development Team. He was responsible for overseeing efforts to leverage digital technologies to accelerate the development and delivery of products, services, and knowledge to help millions of the world's poorest farming families to boost their productivity and incomes. We are very much honored to have you, sir. Thank you. Next, it is great pleasure of mine to invite Dr. John Marcel Ribot, Director of the Generation Challenge Program, GCP, a 10-year initiative of the CGIAR, is responsible for leading and coordinating Now I would like to invite Dr. Varshney to proceed further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anu. I would like to request colleagues who are standing on the back side to come please here. There are many chairs free, so please come inside. Okay, so once again, a very warm welcome to all of you to this session. And you can see the hall is filled. Generally, this is unusual situation in the conferences that on the last day and the last session, we have so many people. And we all are aware that why so many people are still here, that to listen the presentation from Dr. Swaminathan, Dr. John Marcel Ribot, and David Bergvinson. So once again, this is great pleasure to have those dignitaries on the dais. So please join me with big round of applause. So now, because Professor Swaminathan has to take his flight, so we don't have much time, so I will not be taking much time in introducing him, but very quickly, I would like to have brief mention about Professor Swaminathan, who is the chief guest for this conference in this session. And we are important is he has been serving humanity for last several decades. His stated vision is to rid the world of environmentally sustainable agriculture, sustainable food security, and of biodiversity. We call Evergreen Revolution. Because of his contribution to the international agriculture, in 1999, the Time magazine placed him in the Time 20 list of most influential Asian people of the 20th century. He was one of the 3 from India included in that list of 20 most influential Asian people of the 20th century. The other 2 included Mahatma Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore. So we are really pleased to have Professor Swaminathan with us. Later, and we will be starting the session now. Thank you very much.
The Director General of ICRISAT, Dr. Bhagwansan, the brain behind the organization of this meeting, Dr. Rajiv Varshney, other very distinguished participants. I am very grateful to both the DG of ICRISAT and Dr. Varshney for giving me the pleasure of coming back to ICRISAT, whose birth and growth I have witnessed over the last many years. Particularly a great pleasure when you talk about the next generation genomics. A series of such meetings have been organized here in ICRISAT, and I want to congratulate ICRISAT for its foresightedness in arranging these discussions and seeing the very distinguished participants here. I hardly anything which I am going to say which is new to you. Also, as Dr. Varshney said, to catch a flight, and therefore I have no option except to go rather fast. But I'm sure whether ICRISAT website or Dr. Varshney will make available to you if you want the PowerPoint presentation. I have no objection, it's being released. I took up one aspect of it, the hunger aspect. Zero Hunger Challenge is now very much mentioned because Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the United Nations, mentioned by 2025 we should have no hunger. At the moment, about 840 million women, children and men will go to bed hungry tonight. So it is a formidable task, it's a large task, it has been a continuing task in terms of... I put this on not because something new, Gregor Mendel and the normal genetics, the Mendelian genetics and the new genetics, just to show sometimes it takes time for people to understand when a new discovery is made. Because Mendel published his work in 1865, but it was only in 1900 that people started realizing the merits of what he said. Similarly, it took some time, Watson and Crick. Watson and Crick are those whom I happen to know because I was in Cambridge at the same time. I was in the Cambridge Plant Breeding Institute. Watson and Crick were working in the Cavendish lab, where I used to go to take a course from Max Perutz on X-ray diffraction. Therefore, we used to meet now and then on the veranda or in the tea break. Their work also, it took some time for it to become operational, in the sense there were a lot of expectations when the double helix structure was published in Nature. But I saw the last session you had a session on how to publish in Nature. They're very modest. You read that paper by Watson and Crick, they have not claimed very much. They said, so I think it took some time, about 1983, when the first transgenic material was developed, Petunia. This was given to me by Bob Fraley of Monsanto recently, and we have it in it is actual at that time, the actual plant. They had preserved it, the original Petunia. Now, before we go into next generation genomics and so on, it is wise to recall that normal conventional Mendelian genetics, when applied properly, has helped a lot to overcome many of the problems. Until now, that is the one which has made the greatest impact. There are other discoveries which are important, but Clive James chronicles them every year. The latest one is also out of Clive James material. But we were in India, our independence was, the backdrop of the independence was the Great Bengal famine, and then there was a whole series of shortages of food. We had to depend entirely on PL480 wheat from the United States before our public distribution system could be honored. It was so-called ship-to-mouth existence. But about 1968 onwards, India started reversing the trend and producing more and more. They came from the semi-dwarf varieties of wheat, which Norman Borlaug originally supplied, and which our breeders converted into local varieties, Kalyan Sona, Sonalika, many others, which were developed. 2013, the Parliament approves the National Food Security Act, conferring a legal right. It became a right to food, not just like right to information, right to work, right to food, from begging bowl or from ship to mouth to right to food with homegrown food is a major transition. People don't realize generally don't talk about our achievements many times. It's a very important one. Well, these are well known to you, the RH genes and the D genome in the case of wheat. They came originally from the Norin experiment station. Inuzuka from Japan developed these strains. They came from the Norin experiment station. They went to the United States to Orville Vogel. From there, it went to Norman Borlaug. From Norman Borlaug, almost all tropical countries, including India, got the material. At the same time, almost at the same time, the Chinese had discovered the new plant architecture in the case of rice, the DG Wujian gene. It came from China. From China through the International Rice Research Institute and all over the place, the new material went. Both these plant architecture were all conventional Mendelian genetics. Mendelian, that's what I want to say. The changes in the plant architecture and the physiology, because they are both photoinsensitive, these were achieved by normal, intelligent Mendelian breeding. One of the great problems when you want to have higher yield, you'll have to give more water and more fertilizer or other forms of either organic manure or inorganic manure. We'll have to give nutrients. Inputs are needed for output. So here you find one has to have immediately some method by which we can contain the damage by pests and diseases. The earlier suggestions were composite varieties, particularly Norman Borlaug suggested this, phenotypically similar but genotypically diverse. Then came the question of genetic pyramiding, gene pyramiding, which is still our major methodology of overcoming. Genetic shield, gene deployment strategy. And more recent years, when Norman Borlaug, in the last 2 years of his life, was very concerned with this strain of stem rest UG99 from Uganda, a very virulent strain. He had seen in his earlier days what stem rest can do. Therefore, he warned all the countries to be careful about UG99. Fortunately, it has not come to India. It came up to borders of Pakistan, I am told. But in any case, our wheat breeders were ready with resistant material. Most of our material was found to be resistant to UG99. In the 1960s, when we decided to go in for the dwarf varieties of wheat, and along with more fertilizer and more water, one of our major concerns was the rust disease. So what we call genetic checkmating of different races, because the problem is not just one strain. Here the leaf rust, for example. Leaf rust can do a lot of damage. One had number of strains, and therefore you have to identify genes which can specifically checkmate one gene. So genetic checkmating or gene deployment became a very important method of overcoming the problem. Now we talk from genotype to phenotype, selection of phenotypes which are important. Even earlier, I mentioned about the genetic architecture of dwarf wheat or dwarf rices. The phenotype is important, but today, just this morning, Dr. Varshni showed all the new equipment he has, remarkable progress in equipment design. Similarly, everywhere, the phenotype can now be, this is from the facility at IARI, which was the whole series of data, parameters measured for plant phenotyping in wheat, leaf area, chlorophyll content, stem dive, and leaf rolling, and so on. And then you can also measure through phenotyping of abiotic stress. This is in the case of salinity resistant from durum wheats. These are thermal images of durum wheat seedlings treated with salt. And you have a mapping of the phenotyping of abiotic stress through thermal mapping. In other words, a whole series of new technologies are becoming available to the breeder, to the scientist, and so on. Linking genome to the phenome, in this area we face challenges such as the establishment of robust protocols and screening methods, which integrate non-invasive, it's very important, non-invasive automated high throughput measurement of relevant plant traits, both under controlled greenhouse and field scenarios. Plant phenotyping is fast developing as a scientific field that aims to quantify accurately phenotypic traits and give valuable prognosis for plant-environment interaction. Just as this series of seminars are being held here in ICRISAT, similarly, phenotype also, there is an international seminar. Recently, we hosted one in Chennai. Coming back to the question of zero hunger, when you want to attack hunger, you divide your strategy into three parts. One, the most common one is undernutrition or inadequate calorie consumption, calorie deprivation. That largely arises from poverty, inadequate consumption, food. Secondly, protein hunger arising from balanced food is not balanced, it lacks protein. In other words, pulses are grain legumes in which ICRISAT is a leader, chickpea and PGNP and so on. But those people do, because the price is high, not enough consumption. Or milk or egg, whatever it is, some source of protein is important. The third very important one, which is now being recognized increasingly, is malnutrition, micronutrient malnutrition. Vitamin A, vitamin B12, iron, iodine, zinc, and so on. A whole series of micronutrients are lacking in our diet. So that if you are attacking hunger, you have to have a concurrent strategy to attack undernutrition on the one hand, protein hunger on the other, and hidden hunger, what we call hidden hunger, on the third side. Now, 2016 is the International Year of Pulses, and I'm sure ICRISAT will have a good program on pulses. In India, we are at the moment short of 3 to 4 million tons of pulses. We are importing, but still we are short of 3 to 4 million tons of pulses. That's one area where we have to make much more progress. And what we have done in our foundation is, ultimately, the farmers have to grow them. There has to be a market. Unless there is procurement and purchase at a reasonable price, they won't grow them. We have convinced panchayat, the local gram panchayat, elected bodies, with not much irrigation, wherever there is lack of irrigation, like the semi-arid tropics, ICRISAT mandate, we have asked them to grow pulses. They call them pulses panchayat. They meet now and then, discuss how the pulse crop is growing, what prices they are getting, and so on. In other words, the involvement of the local community in production of pulses becomes very important. The other area of micronutrient malnutrition is now being increasingly attacked through biofortification. The biofortification means marrying agriculture with nutrition. There is a DFID-supported project called LANSA, leveraging agriculture for nutrition. In other words, how do agriculture, health, and nutrition, all the three come together. There are three methods of biofortification. One is naturally biofortified plants. The large number, for example, sweet potato, orange flesh sweet potato is vitamin A. Moringa is very rich in many. So there are a large number of naturally occurring biofortified plants in nature. Secondly, by breeding, by normal Mendelian breeding, conventional breeding, you have. The third is genetic modification. All the three methods are being used for biofortification. In the case of inadequate consumption of calories, one of the criticisms against Green Revolution was there are environmental problems, there will be overdrawal of groundwater, soil salinization, more application of pesticides and so on. You all know all that, whole series of criticism for environmentalists. So I coined a term about 30 years ago called Evergreen Revolution. In other words, Green Revolution is another term for productivity improvement, production improvement through productivity improvement. In other words, yield per hectare, not by area expansion. Not vertical growth in productivity, not in horizontal growth in area expansion. The Evergreen Revolution means increase in productivity in perpetuity without ecological harm, because we have no other option. Land is a diminishing resource for agriculture. Land is going out of agriculture all the time. You know only too well. I have seen Hyderabad from the days of ICRISAT. You find land is shrinking resource. So we have no option except to produce more and more from less and less land and less water. That is what I call evergreen, but without ecological damage, Evergreen Revolution. Those who are interested, the difference between the Green Revolution and Evergreen Revolution, you can go through it in leisurely. Green Revolution was a commodity-centered approach. Wheat, rice, corn, maize, jowar, bajra, and so on. But Evergreen Revolution is a natural resource management based. Evergreen Revolution is increasing productivity in perpetuity without associated ecological harm. You can achieve it by two ways. One is organic farming, which is being talked about in our country, particularly in political circles, more and more organic farming. Other method is green agriculture. Conservation farming with the help of integrated pest management, integrated nutrient supply, and integrated natural resource management. If farm ecology and economics go wrong, nothing else will go right. Now, to show the power of normal Mendelian genetics, which is used intelligently by breeders, particularly breeders who are close to the ground, who are able to all the time watch the plant and understand it fully. You find IARI, for example. I gave one example. Is evergreen revolution possible even without the modern genetics? IARI HD 2967. I've taken one new variety from there, a miracle wheat for northwest India, and enormously popular. It has grown very fast. I find whenever I go, farmers praise it. Developed by normal breeding methods, and there is enormous scope for improving. Similarly, in the case of quantitative traits, pyramiding of genes, quantitative traits with heat and drought tolerance, there are a number of varieties which are the consequence of gene pyramiding. Similarly, in the case of rice, Dr. Siddiq, I find, is here, one of the early pioneers in transferring dwarfing genes to basmati varieties. But the more modern Pusa basmati, the latest one, 1509, released in 2013, enormously popular. I think I have given some economic. One for those who are interested in rice and also in this fine grain, long grain basmati kind of rice. There is need for information on functional genomics of cooked kernel elongation and volume expansion in basmati rice. We need more research in that area in order to understand the position. You see the economics of it. This is a public sector research done by IARI scientists. The total budget in IARI for rice is less than 2 crore or 20 million rupees. But 1 year alone, farmers gain about 35,000 crores more from selling this basmati. In other words, there is no other science where the return can be so high as a good variety which is popular. The investment is low, but the return is very high. And therefore, I would hope that more and more public sector institutions also will. ICRSAT is also a public good institution, international public good institution. We have IARI and others, national public good institutions. They must be supported. They must be supported because the return from investment is very high. Mendelian to integrated breeding, the whole topic of Dr. Vashni is integrated breeding. And you find whole omics, what they call proteomics, epigenomics, phenomics, and so on, transcriptome. There are so many omics now, which are all, these are all well known to you, so I'm not going to spend. But what I want to say is genome information on crops is very much growing now, very fast, partly because of technology. We are able to get more and more data quickly. Genome information deluge. This is an article, cover page article in Science. Since 1998, many genomes have been sequenced with due improvements in technologies. Connecting omics data with field-level experiments through a systems approach is the key to realize the dream of evergreen revolution. Omics data and the other data should be combined. This is so many of you have read or might have discussed it here in this hall. The latest, two or 3 months ago in Science, this article appeared on the clustered, regularly interspaced, short palindromic repeat, what they call CRISPR, associated protein 9, CAS9 system, is a novel molecular tool for site-specific genome modification. It's quite an exciting article, and I hope many of their expectations. Possibility to generate marker-free plants that can be rigorously selected using conventional breeding techniques for the desired functions and released as improved varieties. These are all the hopes of the authors, and I'm sure a lot of it has a sound scientific basis behind it. Genotypic by sequence, marker-assisted selection, the high throughput and low sequencing costs result in emerging breeding methodology designed to identify high-density DNA marker information, to accurately predict the genetic value of breeding candidates for complex traits. Genotypic by sequencing. In other words, this whole field of science is progressing very fast. Marker-assisted breeding is, China, for example, has made a lot of progress. Many other varieties today are marker-assisted selection in rice and wheat and so on. One advantage of marker-assisted selection is that it is eligible for organic certification. Those who want to do organic farming IFOAM, the International Federation of Organic Producers Movement, they have said that those varieties, not transgenic, but those developed by marker-assisted selection, are eligible for organic certification. So that's another advantage of the marker. That's what now more breeders are going into this one. Era biofortification I mentioned earlier. There are 3 methods of fortification. The golden rice became Ingo Potricus, popularized the golden rice, but there were a lot of difficulties which were known to you. But in the Indian breeding program, supported by both ICR and the Department of Biotechnology, of which Mrs. Araf also, Dr. Ajay Pereda is a member, a whole series of new varieties, they have been given the vitamin A rich material. We hope there will be some method of allowing them to be field tested, and finally, if they are found good, released, because vitamin A shortage leads to blindness in children. So one of the other methods, UNICEF promotes vitamin A through oral, because you can retain it in the body for some time. Beta-carotene enriched hybrids of maize, a whole series of maize varieties today are again, in all the cases I mentioned earlier, what is happening now, agriculture and nutrition are getting integrated, Barry. Our breeders are becoming conscious, not only in terms of yield or disease resistance, but also of nutritive properties. Earlier only protein content, but today the micronutrient rich enrichment is also important. Low uric acid mustard varieties, very popular. Average seed yield is very high, moderately tolerant to high temperature, seedling and maturity. The Pusa mustard variety of tissue-specific expression of ferritin gene, Dr. Ajay Pereda and his colleagues, he might have given in his paper, the transfer of genes from Avicennia marina to rice. Again, these rice varieties are being grown in Kalpakam in the atomic energy nuclear power plant compound, but they have to be now taken to the field and field tested so that we see how it is doing. There is also the problem, increasingly problem of breeding. One of the reasons given for promoting modern genetic engineering is that you are going to face new challenges as a result of climate change. One important implication of climate change is higher temperature. The common feeling, according to the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it may go up by 2 degrees centigrade. By the end of the century, the average temperature may go by 2 degrees. That means about 6 to 7 million tons of wheat less the Punjab, Haryana region, because 2 degrees more means 1 week less in duration. On the other hand, I saw somebody from Saskatchewan or somebody, they will gain because duration will become longer. Hours will become shorter. Short duration loses the gain. So the other important implication of climate change is sea level rise. And there again, there is almost unanimity in the conclusion that sea level is going to rise slowly but steadily. It is now already rising and going to go up. So what we have done in our foundation is seawater constitutes 97% of the world's water resource. We all talk about water scarcity, water security and so on, but 97% of the world's water is seawater. What are we doing with it? We have an institute at Bhavnagar which works on seawater farming, but our foundation, Agri-Aqua Farms, Sylvie Aquaculture, you have either mangroves or non-mangrove halophytes plus aquaculture, marine fisheries. The combined integrated fish silviculture program. Recently, FAO recognized a very important system of cultivation which is relevant to sea level rise in Kuttanad in Kerala, where for over 150 years ago, farmers started cultivating rice below sea level, 5 to 6 meters below sea level. This has now been recognized as a globally important agricultural heritage site. There are 3 crops which are grown. One is coconut on the border, fish during the non-monsoon season, and during the monsoon season, when you have fresh water, rice. Rice, fish, and coconut. Now, many of these halophytes are disappearing, genetic erosion. After all, finally, biodiversity is the feedstock for the biotechnology industry. Without biodiversity, we can't transfer anything at all. So that's why I said biodiversity is the feedstock for the biotechnology industry. You find a whole series of halophytes are disappearing. So what we have done in a place called Vedaranyam, where there was a salt satyagraha along with Dandi, when Mahatma Gandhi started Dandi Salt March, which was a turning point in our fight for independence. At that time, Rajaji started the Salt March at Vedaranyam in Tamil Nadu. There we have established a genetic garden of halophytes at Vedaranyam, converting seawater into fresh water through plants. There are also genes, this is well known, Thailand, if you go to Thailand during the monsoon season, they harvest the rice on boats, they go in boats. In fact, when I was in Erie, we established a center near Ayodhya to look into the problems of deep water rices. And today, there are a number of varieties, ability to elongate with the rise of water levels, develop nodal tillers and roots from the upper nodes, the upward bending and so on. You have a number of. These are mangroves. Those who have not seen mangroves, sometimes people talk about mango. It is mangroves. Many of them are disappearing. In South India, after tsunami of 2004, December 26th, people started realizing the value of mangroves because it acted as a bioshield, a shield against tsunami, and mangrove forests are important. Again, Dr. Ajay Pareda and his colleagues have used it as a source of important genes, salt tolerance, rice varieties, apart from iron deficiency and so on. So let me conclude by saying, this is from Global Agriculture Towards 2050. Agriculture in the 21st century faces multiple challenges. It has to produce more food and fiber to feed a growing population. With a smaller rural labor force, more feedstock for a potentially huge bioenergy market. Bioenergy market is also, energy is very important. Contribute to overall development in the many agriculture-dependent developing countries, adopt more efficient and sustainable production methods, and adapt to climate change. These are all the challenges before you. This is second generation genomics, third generation. You have to fight all these problems. But at the same time, I'm fond of quoting, General Eisenhower came to open the World Agriculture Fair to Delhi, 1959. I've been telling my molecular friends, you also have like world, they had a big pavilion called Atoms on the Farm. Abel and others, I tell you, you hold molecules on the farm, similar exhibition. Atoms on the farm, because at that time, there was a lot of controversy about irradiated food. Just as I said earlier, it took 35 years before Mendel's laws could be recognized. 2 years ago, not 2 years, 3 or 4 years ago, when the previous president of the United States came, Mr. Bush, the junior Bush, to India, for the first time, the newspaper said the United States allowed Alfonso mango to be imported. They had banned mangoes because they were afraid of the weevil inside the mango. But on one condition, you irradiate the mango before sending. Where irradiation was feared, today you make it a condition for it. So attitudes change. But I'm trying to tell the younger people here, don't get discouraged if there is some problem. People have to understand the problem. But the reason, unless we have communication, more recently both Nature and Science have been writing about need for scientists to communicate the results to the political leaders on the one hand. In the United States it's common because they have to convince the senators before funds will come. But in our country and so on, Eisenhower said farming looks mighty easy when your plow is a pencil or a pen and you 1,000 miles away from the cornfield. So ultimately, whether you are second generation, third generation genomic, unless you are very near the farmer, the results will not go. They may result in publications, but that will not result in attacking the problems I have mentioned. So I wish you all great success, and thank you again, Dr. Varshini, for organizing this meeting, and all the best to you in your new career. You have got a distinguished career, and the new DG of ICRISAT, let him, we give our best wishes for him to take the institute forward. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Let's continue to have the big round of applause. So thank you very much, sir, for wonderful. So as I mentioned that Professor Swaminathan has to go, but at the same time, we are very much blessed. And he has not only summarized the different advances in genetics and genomics integrated breeding, on the other hand, he also gave the guidance that, well, what we need to do this for the next generation scientists in the area of next generation genomics. Thank you very much, sir, once again, and wish you all the best, sir, once again.